I see, yeah.
Blackacre, what is it? It's a 180-acre working farm that was established by Edward Tyler back in 1790. His son, Moses Tyler, built all the houses on the land that his father gave him. He built the stone cottage, the spring house, the smokehouse, the barn, most of which are still standing today. The Tylers owned it and worked it as a working farm until the 1880s or thereabouts. Since that time, it changed hands 5 or 6 times, and the Judge Macaulay Smith and his wife Emily purchased it in 1950. They're very dedicated conservationists and also very interested in public education. They approached the school system after they donated the entire property and buildings to the Kentucky Nature Preserves Commission to set up an environmental education center here. The school system adopted it as their environmental education center, but we took it one step farther. It is an environmental education center. It's a demonstration center. We have a lot of schools that come out here and partake in all the activities, have in-service, have programs sponsored by their individual teachers, but then they go back to their local classroom or local school and build a local nature center. Wheatley Elementary has a whole courtyard as a result of coming out here. Their courtyard is a perfect environmental education center. It has a small pond. It has all the different logs for kids to get on top of and have reading class, or they just are able to incorporate it to their local school area.
And then over to your right, in the water, there's some water that's gathered inside. There's an old urn, the top on it. You lift the top, and you pour this warm milk into the urn, and then you replace the top. And you turn, and you look back over the apples, and you remember that you're hungry. And boy, you're glad it's almost breakfast time. So you walk back up the steps, replace the candle, blow it out, and you open the door and you step out into the sunlight. The sun is just a little higher now in the sky. Walk over to the stone cottage, and you open the door. What do you see when you open the door? Use your imagination. What do you see? There's no television, no stereo. Sights are quite different. But more than anything, you're overcome by the wonderful smells. Breakfast is cooking. Boy, are you hungry. What would you be having for breakfast on a farm back in 1790? You wouldn't be having rainbow cereal or Captain Crunch cereal or rainbow bread. What would you be having? Just think about it. If you concentrate, you can almost taste it, almost smell it. So eat a real good breakfast.
That is the key to education, is getting the children to begin to look on their own, or to do their own wanting to know and their own searching for answers, or to recognize their own possibilities and the options that they have, you know, the things that they can do here and anywhere else, you know. So, and that's one of the big things here, I think, is that it's a different environment, and it's just a freshness, a variety of approaches here that hopefully they can take back to a normal school or to their own home or neighborhood or wherever and apply those kinds of things to their own lives, playing or learning or whatever. You know, I think it all should be one big thing.
Now, this is how the spinning wheel works. There's a treadle down here, and when I step on that, that makes a stick go up and down. That turns the big wheel around. There's a string that goes around the outside of the big wheel and around the outside of the smaller wheel, and that's called the drive band, because this isn't the yarn that goes around here. This is just a piece of string. Your yarn is going to go through a little hole right here, out here, and across these hooks onto the spool, and this is where the yarn is stored. Now, let's see if I can get... The spinning wheel wasn't working earlier. There we go. Now, what's happening is, as the wheels turn around, they're twisting the wool, and it's turning right into yarn. And all I'm doing is adjusting the size of the wool, or the yarn, as it's going onto the spool. When I stop and make them think and talk about why we're doing this or where we get these things, and all of a sudden you can see their eyes light up like, oh, you use the wool, and you use the wool to make the yarn, and then you use the yarn to make the cloth, and then, but the wool was grown on the sheep. So they get the whole idea, I believe. And I think they do begin to see why we're doing it here. I think they definitely get the idea. I think they begin to appreciate the fact that how you make cloth a little bit more than I think they get a better insight into the production of it, and the fact that nowadays it's very, very easy to go out and buy clothing if you have the money for it. In the old days, it didn't matter how much money you had, you really had to work hard to get your clothing, because everybody had to work at it just about, unless if you didn't do the work, you had servants that had to work hard to do it. So,
would you rather live back in 1790 or the present? Would you rather live then or now? Why? Back then, why?
Because it's worse now.
What's worse about now?
Everybody's going crazy.
People are going crazy now, huh? Okay, what, Lily?
It's got pollution now and they didn't back then.
Not as much pollution back then? What?
We had clean water.
More clean water? So you think back then was, okay?
When you went to school, you had to walk, and I liked it back then.
I can't explain it, but it's more people better. We got better food and better schools and things like that than we did in the old days, so I like it now.
What do you think?
I like it better than back then.
Why?
Because there wasn't many people back then to kill people.
Oh, not as much crime back
Yeah.
then, okay? What?
I like it back then because you have more jobs to do instead of now, because most now they're getting more machines instead of people.
If someone came to visit us from another community, they might tell us some stories about what was going on in the next town. That was a way of spreading the news. This first one that I want to do for you is appropriate for this time of the year. What holiday are we getting ready for?
Halloween.
Halloween. And a lot of you are trying to think of what you can be for Halloween. And a lot of girls like to be a what?
Princess.
A
strawberry shortcake.
Okay, I'm gonna show you how you can how you can become a real witch. And there are good witches and there are bad witches, like in The Wizard of Oz. But what I'm gonna do is a bad witch.
Yay!
All right, what you have to do is you have to start off with just a little bit of jealousy. You have to want what someone else has got. And you got to think, Jimmy, you got to think, if I had what they've got, I can do a whole lot better with it than they can. You get so you can't even watch the videos on TV without thinking, I could walk on the moon, or run on the moon, or moonwalk, or whatever it is that Michael Freeze-Dry Jackson does.
Michael Freeze.
A lot better than he could. It's no big deal. I lose a glove all the time. I could glisten as good as he does. I'm not going to sweat. I don't want to put in that kind of time, that kind of energy. I find with the outdoor education, getting outdoors with the children, you establish a type of bond with the children that you don't have other circumstances. Last year was my first year for doing this, and it was my best year for teaching. It was my best year as far as the relationship that I had with my students. There was a bond there that I had never had before. I think partly it was because they realized that I was willing to take the extra time to do these things for them, but also it was just getting out and socializing with the children aside from the classroom activities. In the center of your eye, they've turned into slits. And you start realizing that you can see a lot better at night than you can in the day. And because you can see better at night, you start having these dark thoughts all the time. And you start thinking dark thoughts about people. And if anybody ever asks you to do anything for them, you've got one reply, just one. No. No. It's real easy. Look at this. No. When you get the children outdoors in a relaxed environment, they relax and they talk more openly. And children that have an oral language problem, they are much more verbal. And you can much more easily correct speech or bring speech out of them than you can in the classroom where it's very stiff and structured. And you find that the more you say no, you find your hair starts getting wiry. Every time you say no, your hair gets wirier and wirier. So now you got these green eyes, and you got this wiry hair, and these dark thoughts. And because you've got all these dark thoughts about people, sometimes every once in a while you will promise to do something, but you back out. And you find the more you back out, your posture starts getting kind of stooped. It changes and you start getting bent over. So then you find you've got these green eyes and these dark thoughts and this wiry hair, and you're all stooped over, and first thing you know, your voice changes and you start cackling, and you come to a place like this and you get yourself a bat and you go, hey, I'm a witch. And that's how you become a witch. So what do you start with? A little bit of what? Jealousy.
We tend to stress the idea that learning comes from within. The behavior comes from within. If you wish to affect behavior, if you wish to affect learning, you have to establish those controls from within. The reading readiness and the background skills for students to comprehend what they are memorizing is just as important. And one thing that we do out at Blackacre is provide that background experience, provide that reading readiness, provide that level of interest in being a learner.
Come here. He's going everywhere. Come on. She skipped you. No, she didn't. Sashay up. There we go. Yep. Okay.